everyone, it's Jack from Cultaholic.com back again with what happened at NXT TakeOver Phoenix the night before the Royal Rumble. This was a really, really good show, as we're used to from NXT TakeOver now. It's so consistent, it's insane. 5 really good matches, all of like varying quality, but generally the standard was very, very high. Less sort of run-ins and shenanigans that I think we may have expected given the whole DIY storyline and the ongoing saga between Gargano and Ciampa. Are they friends? Are they not? Who knows? But at the same time, one of these matches, and I won't reveal which one quite yet, you have to watch the video, but one of these matches was so good and genuinely, in my opinion, a real match of the year candidate. Maybe even the strongest match we've seen in 2019 so far. So, without any further ado, let's take a look at what happened at NXT TakeOver Phoenix. The night began with what I guess can now be considered the kind of standard or semi-standard, hot, fast-paced tag team opener. Triple H seems to love throwing tag matches on first, and when you've got a tag division as strong as NXT's, you can sort of see why. This match was really fast-paced, really good double team moves and stuff. It was, of course, the Undisputed Era, represented by Kyle O'Reilly and Roderick Strong, against the War Raiders, Hanson and Rowe. Yeah, this got off to a really explosive start, loads of double team moves and that sort of thing, some of which succeeded, some of which failed because of the surprising agility often of the War Raiders and the sneakiness and the heel tactics of the Undisputed Era. Hanson in particular really showed off some constantly impressive agility for a man of his size, cartwheeling at several stages out the way of certain moves and that sort of thing. It was really, really good. He evaded a double team move towards the end with a cartwheel, and that sort of led to the finish actually. He tagged Rowe back in, who came in, and then he hit the power slam, power bomb combo on both guys, and then they hit their double team finisher, the fallout. And yeah, in a decent length match, not too long, not too short, the War Raiders are new NXT Tag Team Champions. Now, I think that this probably plays a little bit into the whole storyline of the Undisputed Era's rampant smugness. They were saying in the build-up to this show that they're going to hold all the gold this year, all of the titles in NXT, apart from, I guess, the women's one, because there's no women in the group. But, no, they've immediately lost the tag titles at the first takeover of 2019. Will this be the start of the end of the Undisputed Era? Will they get called up at different times? Will they all get called up as a collective? And where do they go from here? Because personally, I predicted that the War Raiders would lose this one actually. I thought the titles wouldn't change hands. Thought the War Raiders had all the momentum after the War Games match, when of course they were on the team that won against the Undisputed Era. But in this match, I thought maybe the Undisputed Era would win, leading to another match, a rematch between the pair, where the War Raiders would finally get their victory. That's just not what happened. Immediately, Hanson and Rowe have the tag team titles. I sense that a rematch will be incoming, but I don't know if they're going to win it back. So a really good way to open the show, and the excitement only stayed high from there because we got the customary ringside appearance from some superstars. This wasn't any new signings though. These were a couple of NXT UK stars, two of the biggest stars of the NXT UK brand, Pete Dunne of course, and Tony Storm, the two champions of their respective divisions. Tony Storm was really happy to be there. Pete Dunne did not look happy to be there, as is fitting with his character. Well done, Pete. Lovely, lovely, lovely working of the crowd. I'm sure he didn't actually care that much as well. Next up, Matt Riddle versus Kassius Ohno. This match thankfully went longer than they won at TakeOver War Games, which worked at the time when Matt Riddle beat Ohno in a matter of seconds. Thankfully, this one was a little bit longer. It was just a shade under 10 minutes, I believe. And even though it was relatively short, I think probably the shortest match of the night, they still packed a lot of stuff in. This was probably the stiffest match of the night, which is exactly what Riddle versus Ohno should be. Two guys who are really, really good at striking and that sort of thing. There were a lot of heavy exchanges in this one. Matt Riddle actually got busted open slightly at one point, because when he was on the canvas at one point, Kassius Ohno just stamped in his face, bust him open slightly, a little bit, and then later on also bit his toes, because Matt Riddle wrestles in bare feet, so he bit his feet. He just got his foot in his mouth. Some people are into it. I'm not going to kink shame. The story of the match though was that as good as Kassius Ohno is, Riddle is just that little bit better, and towards the end he actually had Kassius Ohno beat. Ohno was on his knees in the middle of the ring, Riddle was standing over him like, I'm about to finish you off, and Ohno, in classic Ric Flair heelish fashion, just tried to make friends, offered him the fist bump. Matt Riddle went, absolutely not. Riddle then hit a big knee, a sleeper suplex, and then finished Ohno off in very inventive fashion, a very different finish to what we're used to seeing in professional wrestling. He was hitting him with elbows, he had like Ohno's limbs trapped, he couldn't get away, elbow after elbow after elbow, and Ohno submitted due to the strikes. Yeah, you don't really see that in wrestling a lot, but it fits perfectly with Matt Riddle's character. It does sometimes happen in mixed martial arts, not as often as like, it's a rare finish compared to like a decision or a knockout or a submission or whatever, but at the same time, it does happen in the world of MMA. So I liked it. I thought it played well on how, lethal Matt Riddle is with those strikes. And Ohno, I guess, is one of those guys who just doesn't really get affected too much by a loss. I know that, he loses quite a lot and we might like to see that change, but he does play a very important role, in NXT, putting over the incoming guys. I think if it happens too many more times, it might start to get a little bit tiresome, but this match certainly, it was one of the ones I was least hyped for on the show, but it delivered to the degree that I think it could. It had a relatively low ceiling compared to some of the other matches in terms of storyline and drama, but they delivered pretty much as fully as they could have done. Next up, the North American Championship match between the champion Ricochet and the challenger Johnny Gargano. This was unbelievable. This was crazy. It was a fairly long match, about 25 minutes long, but it absolutely flew by because of just how good it was. And this is the match in the intro that I was talking about as a match of the year candidate for certain. So the story of the opening part of the match was no matter how hard Johnny tried to out-wrestle Ricochet, Ricochet was just too agile to get caught by Johnny. He was like doing like head springs, like that sort of thing off his head. He was running around the ring, dashing around, reversing everything that Johnny could throw at him. And it was really, really awesome. And that meant that Johnny had to switch up his style, which he did pretty quickly. He started to ground Ricochet a lot more, using a lot of cradles and crucifixes, trying to look for either a pinfall or the Gargano escape. But at this stage, with Ricochet fresh, he just couldn't get it on. The match would then start to swing more definitively in Ricochet's favor, and he hit some truly insane stuff. Everything he does is just so perfect. One of the spots that I remember the most was his kind of step-up moonsault off the second turnbuckle to the outside, which was just delivered absolutely perfectly. And Gargano was in perfect position as well to catch him on the way down and sell and everything. This was just like, honestly, this was maybe the best Ricochet performance I've ever seen. I've seen quite a lot of Ricochet matches as well, but I struggle to think of one that was as good as this match. I can't tell whether this is a bit of recency bias because we've just watched it, but I thought it was just awesome. Like, Twitter was going absolutely wild with excitement at how good this match was. Very, very impressive stuff. You can totally tell as well that the pair have got a lot of chemistry and history between them. They wrestled a lot in their previous sort of independent circuit careers, and they just have such a good chemistry. And it was great that this match got quite a long length for them to really explore that fully. It was so, if you haven't watched this match, seriously watch it because it's really something special. As the match progressed, things started to get a little bit more impressive, even more so than the opening, where basically one of the, maybe the most memorable spot of the match for me was Johnny going for a tope suicida to the outside, maybe even his tornado DDT variant, but Ricochet caught him perfectly across his shoulders. Ricochet looking like Brock Lesnar somehow. A big theme of this match actually was how Ricochet's not just agile, but strong as well. He was powering out of a lot of things too, which was really cool to see. And not something that's typically a constant flavour of Ricochet's matches. That was pretty good. Later on, Johnny started to work his way back into the match. At one point, I think he super kicked Ricochet, like took his head off with it, but Ricochet tumbled to the outside, meaning that he couldn't go for the pinfall. Shades of like CM Punk versus John Cena from Money in the Bank 2011. It was really, really cool to see. We also had Ricochet flipping out of like a Frankensteiner or a Hurricane Rana attempt, landing on his feet, and then they just sort of looked at each other, and it wasn't a pause as long as when Ospreay did it to Ibushi over in New Japan. It wasn't played up to that much of like a, it didn't bring the match to a standstill, but they just kept going at it, and it was really awesome. They really maintained such a high pace in this match, but slowed it down at the right times as well to tell a really good story. Gargano then got more and more frustrated and couldn't just put Ricochet away. Couldn't really get a real foothold in the match just because his opponent was just too strong. So he went to the outside, ripped up the mat, exposing the floor at one part of the ringside area, and went for Ciampa's draping DDT. But he stopped, looked around at the crowd, and thought against it, which got a pop. Everyone was like, yes, Johnny, very good stuff. It reminded me of Sami Zayn versus Neville from one of the earlier takeovers, where Sami Zayn was going to use the belt to win and beat Neville, but then the crowd were like, no, don't turn heel, and he didn't. and did actually win in the end. Gargano, though, wouldn't be quite as good a boy as Sami Zayn was back in the day. So still, Gargano just couldn't put Ricochet away, and at one point even got caught in his own finisher, the Gargano escape, and had to get out of that, reaching the ropes, which was, really cool to see. I like it when guys get out of their own submissions because they know how to withstand it, or they know how to counter it. He didn't counter it, but he crawled across the ring and made the ropes. It was nice to see. But Gargano went back to the outside and this time hit, it was either a vertical suplex or a brainbuster. I think it was a brainbuster, but a slightly safer one because you don't want to be slamming someone's head down fully onto concrete, which is totally understandable, but it still looked sick. Really good stuff. Ricochet was just out cold. Johnny rolled him back into the ring and finished with the springboard, rope assisted DDT thing. And he's the new NXT North American champion, and what a way to win it. I honestly think, so far, we've not had much of 2019, so far, we're still in January, but I honestly think this is my early match of the year contender. Obviously there'll be others later on, but for now, this was the best match I've seen this year. A shade better even, I think, than Kenny Omega versus Hiroshi Tanahashi in the main event of Wrestle Kingdom. And I was there live for that in the Tokyo Dome as well. That's how good I think this Gargano Ricochet match was. It was excellent. Instantly for me, one of the best matches in NXT history. Next up, the penultimate match of the night, the Women's Championship match between Shayna Baszler defending against Bianca Belair, who is of course undefeated, but is she overrated? They were in a really difficult spot here after such an excellent match, but honestly, I was really impressed with how they kept the crowd invested. They sort of taunted each other a lot in the early stages with overrated, undefeated, and it really helped keep the crowd involved with chants and that sort of thing. I realised how Baszler had clearly done her homework on her opponent in this match, using the hair to her advantage rather than letting Belair use it to her advantage. At one point, for example, she used the hair to pull Belair into the ring post. She'd stand on it sometimes to gain leverage during moves and that sort of thing. Really, really nice to see. Eventually, Belair actually did get to use her hair, whipping Shayna Baszler across the torso. It actually left a scratch, a visible mark. It must hurt a lot taking that move. Then Belair hit her finisher, but the referee had been bumped, so there was no one to count the pinfall. Belair actually got a visual pinfall on the champ. I suspect we'll see a rematch at some point down the line. And then here came the horsewomen, Jessamyn Duke and Marina Shafir, to interfere. Belair saw them off. She seemed to be doing all right, but then that gave Baszler time to recover and catch her in the Kirifuda clutch. But Belair, who showed off some really impressive strength in this match, similar to Ricochet actually in the match before, but on a bigger opponent than herself, it looked even cooler. Sometimes she was just tossing Shayna Baszler into suplexes. She stood up out of the clutch, hit a really nice suplex, and then went to the top rope to hit the 450 splash, but the two horsewomen got back involved. She had to sort of beat them away. It gave Baszler time to recover again, and she evaded the 450 and locked on the clutch again. And this time, Belair was in this submission for a long, long time, tried to stand up out of it twice. The crowd were getting really into it, really wanting her to escape, but this time she just couldn't do it. And at the second attempt of trying to power out, she fell back and eventually passed out. And Shayna Baszler is still the NXT Women's Champion. That was a good match, not the best thing on the show, but they really delivered in terms of their position on the card. It was difficult, but they managed to pull off a good one. Also, I think it should probably put an end to this whole overrated thing for Bianca Belair, because yes, against a workhorse, you'd expect Belair to be able to hold up her end of the bargain. But Shayna Baszler's not that experienced either, and they both did really well in putting on an emotionally investing match and that sort of thing. So, fair play. I think they should put an end to the overrated thoughts about Bianca Belair. Now, on to the main event. Before we get there, though, I should mention that there was a special guest at ringside, Velveteen Dream. We saw him arrive earlier in the night, getting out of a limousine with two glamorous ladies. They sat at ringside for the main event, but curiously, didn't actually get involved at any stage. I'm not certain whether this is going to carry on in storyline form or whether it was just a little bit of flavour for the match. I don't really know what to make of this yet. And now, yes, the main event between the NXT champion Tommaso Ciampa and the former champion, the man he beat for the title quite a while ago now, Aleister Black. This match, right, it was good, certainly. It was probably on balance. Maybe it's hard to tell what the second best match of the night was. Clearly the best was Gargano Ricochet. This was probably the best match of the night, but it built slowly, built really slowly, and you could tell the crowd were getting kind of tired by this point. There'd been so much excellent action beforehand, so it risked being disappointing at first, not because of the performance of the two guys, just because it started off quite slowly, and it was they had to drag the crowd into it as it went on, which they succeeded in doing, by the way. So Ciampa spent a lot of the opening of this match mercilessly working Aleister Black's leg, and it really worked. It started off slowly, but it really played into the story of the match really nicely later on. Black was selling the leg really well, really consistently, and he was missing all sorts of moves because of it, or being unable to make a quick pinfall, or that sort of thing. A pinfall attempt, obviously. Yeah, it was really nice to see. At one point, for example, when things started to pick up, Ciampa was on the top rope, Black charged across the ring, knocked him off with an enziguri, but obviously his standing leg couldn't support him that well, and he also tumbled to the outside, taking quite a scary bump actually. It looked really dangerous and quite exciting as well. It's sort of implied actually that Aleister Black would have this match won were it not for the whole merciless legwork of Ciampa earlier on in the match. It really shows off like his intelligence, but also his cunning and his ruthlessness and all that good heel stuff. Ciampa then went to the outside and exposed the same bit of flaw that Gargano did earlier in the night. Storytelling, love it. But the referee argued with him, and it meant that he couldn't quite grab a hold of Black before Black had recovered, and Black just flew in out of nowhere with a massive meteora off the apron, one of the best moments of the match, completely wiped out Ciampa, rolled him back in the ring. Black mass connected, but his standing leg gave way again, and he couldn't make the cover in time. He crawled across the ring slowly, finally got to Ciampa to make the cover, and then Ciampa rolled onto his stomach. Genius! That doesn't happen enough in wrestling. That was really cool to see, really inventive and really frustrating, but in the right sort of way, because the heel champion's being clever and a bit of a dick. Black then went for a second black mass, and Ciampa pulled the referee in the way. The kick missed both of them. Then he managed to hit Black with the fairy tale ending, but Black kicked out, so Ciampa went for another one, and then instead of making the pinfall attempt then, went for a third, and Black was able to get out of it, and everyone was like, what is going to happen here? He went for the black mass again and just crumpled to the canvas, couldn't stand up, couldn't connect with it, and suffered another fairy tale ending, and Tommaso Ciampa picked up the victory and is still the NXT champion. Now after the match, two very interesting things happened, one on the broadcast and one afterwards that I've seen reported on Twitter by people who were there live at the event. Shout out to Megaran, for example, who was one of the people who tweeted about it. So Ciampa stood at the top of the ramp with his title celebrating, and when the signature came on, Johnny Gargano slowly walked out, like Ciampa did to him at NXT TakeOver Philadelphia this time last year. But instead of attacking him, Gargano simply stood by his side, raised his own North American Championship, and it looks like DIY are united once again. Will they go after the tag belts, for example? Will they try and hold all the gold they can? Very exciting times. Now, the thing that happened after the show is interesting too, and could have implications for the Royal Rumble. I'm not certain whether this was just a house show finish to send the crowd home happy, or whether this is actually important in the grand scheme of things. Apparently after the show, Adam Cole came out as well. They all had a bit of a scuffle, the three heels, and the three baby faces who were Velveteen Dream, who presumably came in from his ringside seat, Ricochet, who'd obviously lost his belt earlier in the night, and Aleister Black as well, who just lost that match. They all brawled with the heels. Apparently it all went backstage, and then the three baby faces came back out to soak in the applause of the crowd. That's Dream, Black and Ricochet. Is this their farewell to NXT, or was this simply just a house show finish to send them home happy? Will we see any of these three guys in the Men's Royal Rumble tomorrow, or will it just, come to nothing? I guess we'll find out more tomorrow, and if not, then on NXT as well later on. Yeah, really good show in conclusion. Not like elite level takeover like New Orleans, for example, but certainly right up there. A very good show. Gargano and Ricochet, man, check it out because it was so good. There was obviously two title changes too. Not only is Johnny Gargano the North American champion, but War Machine, that's their indie name, the War Raiders are the tag team champions as well. Shayna's still the women's champion, and Ciampa is still the NXT champion. I'm excited to see what happens next, and I'm bloody excited as well for the Royal Rumble tomorrow night. So that's all for now. Thank you very much for watching this video. What happened at NXT TakeOver Phoenix? I've been Jack from Cultaholic.com. You can follow me on Twitter if you want to, at Jack the Jobber. You can follow all of us at Cultaholic, and check out our Patreon too, patreon.com/Cultaholic. And never forget, of course, if you haven't done so already, to hit subscribe and to join us.